Guys, it was a couple weeks back, I went to Las Vegas for SHOT Show, which is like this massive, outdoorsman firearms show. It's one of the biggest in the world. It's huge. And we were there for about 4 days. I went in and the goal was to meet with a bunch of people from the industry and do podcasts, and we were super successful. We had like 7 podcasts done, and they're starting to hit
You were putting in work.
We were putting in work. So here's the point. Like, I didn't sleep much. And I was stupid on night 1. Like I used to do when I was like 22 years old. I went hard. Yeah. So we got there. The schedule got changed around a little bit. I actually didn't have to record on day 1. On night 1 when we got there, Eli got a sweet setup for the next couple of days because it was going to be really intense, like back to back. And went downstairs to where like kind of the end up is, but it's also the start point and the end up for all the people because we're in the main hotel where the show was there. And we're at the bar and, one conversation turns into a drink and 2 drinks turned into 3 more conversations. And then next thing you know, I'm looking at my watch going, fuck, we have to be up early tomorrow. And the bottom line was I maybe slept 3 hours that night. That's how I started off the show. And I was stressed going into it. It's
a lot.
Because I had to get all the equipment on the plane. Like Eli was coming out later. Anytime we do remote stuff, it takes its toll on me. Like, so I didn't sleep very well. Then the day or 2 going
Leading
in.
up, yeah.
Yeah, I'd gone in on a Tuesday. And then after that, like, because I was coming through these interviews and a lot of them were happening, or at least every day I was having one kind of midday or morning and then one in the evening. I was coming out of that, and you're in Vegas, so you don't really know which way is up or down. Like, I remember day 2, I'm like, I have to get outside today.
To see the sky.
I have to get
I
some
don't know what
vitamin D
they
and some
pump
oxygen.
in there, man, dude.
It's a problem. So there's all these confounding factors, but the bottom line is I was not sleeping well, and I never sleep that well in hotels anyway. By the time I got back over the weekend and I came home on Saturday, I felt like I'd been run over by a truck. And a lot of it was, go back to the drinking on night 1. I did do that. So the alcohol is a thing. And I know that for me too. We'll talk about that. But it was just this accumulation of not getting enough sleep because normally my sleep hygiene is pretty controlled. I get at least 8 hours a night now. And I know that's super important for me. And I've gone through periods of my life where that was not the case. And I was not a good human on a lot of ways. I was not performing well, functioning well, thinking well, just everything was upside down. And there were confounding factors there. But I think the thing to note here is like, I think it's wild. It's a massive percentage. It's like 65 or 67% of the United States of Americans report they get less than 7 hours of sleep a night.
Yep.
And like 7 or below 7 hours in a 24-hour period is directly, now we're making connections to things like low insulin sensitivity, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, a lot of the major metabolic.
Testosterone drop up to 6%.
Yeah, hormone dysregulation, gut dysregulation. I mean, sleep is so important, and we're not getting enough of it, for probably a lot of reasons. I want to talk about that and maybe bring to light some people on how things they should probably know about their sleep and maybe make them aware and then maybe help them with some tips on how to get better sleep. Yeah. But I think we all know like what happens if I don't get enough sleep for a couple of days.
Oh, I'm an asshole.
Oh, total asshole. And I know you are. Like you're kind of that way anyway, Jess. So I mean, we take a couple.
What are you talking about, man?
We take a couple hours away.
I'm so nice, dude. My God, I only got 4 hours last night. By the way, if we're talking about
you're
sleep.
a ray of sunshine, man.
Yeah, we take a couple hours away, and it changes things.
Sure.
So it's changing things hormonally. It's changing things like from a chemical perspective. And it changes how we function. Obviously,
Shortens the time that you're going to grow.
There's all kinds of things that go into that. So. Yeah, so I got Steven and Jeff today. We're just going to get into the sleep talk.
Howdy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing to get across first and foremost is that sleeping well is about more than just not being tired. Mm-hmm. I think that's what a lot of people equate sleeping with as just energy levels.
Yeah.
That's about it. Yep. Like, oh, well, I'm not all that tired throughout the day. It's fine. I get enough sleep. They just assume that just no sleep equals low energy. But inadequate sleep, or less than optimal sleep quality, all of that, it has a lot of downstream effects.
A litany of issues.
Which you guys already touched on several of them. cognitive function, mood, metabolism, hormones, for, you know, those who are concerned with performance, your ability to build muscle, your ability to lose weight, all of those are affected directly by your sleep. So it's a lot more than just not being tired. And I think there is also a big issue of quality versus quantity.
Oh,
Yeah,
1000%. Yeah.
Yep.
Just because you're asleep doesn't mean you're getting the benefits associated with the sleep that you're getting. Just you're unconscious, but what's really going on?
Yeah. Are you really going through your sleep cycles properly? Which, unless you have some kind of tracker, or you get some type of sleep study done, you really don't know how restorative your sleep actually is.
Mhm.
And this was something that I've actually been exploring more so recently. The time you're in bed versus the time you're actually asleep,
Yeah.
there can be a disparity there. I've been tracking my sleep for the last 6 weeks or so, and I didn't quite realize. And I'm like, oh, I'm in bed for 8 hours, but maybe I was actually only asleep for 6 hours and 45 minutes. And that's not okay. I'm lying in bed, just staring at the ceiling. I'm awake.
And this is your device telling you this.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. This is a wearable that I've been using, and you know those times that you're not really fully conscious, but maybe you're tossing and turning, or you're just very briefly awake. That can add up to an hour or more that you're in bed but not actually sleeping.
Yeah. I mean, we've already talked about what happens what you can be aware of, like right away when you're not getting enough sleep. You know, what that does to mood, what that does to performance, what that does to drive, you know, and all those kind of things. But yeah, I mean, for a while there, sleep was highly talked about. Like it was like, look, this is becoming a very popular subject. And then going back to the wearables, we found out about, you know, HRV, recovery periods, the types of sleep. There were different devices that came out, things like Oura rings and Whoops, and I think even the Fitbit was doing stuff for a little
Fitbit.
bit.
Dude, your iPhone, if you leave it on the side, will do it now too. But I'm not.
So there's all these gadgets, right, to measure, and I think there's still questions out there about the algorithms used to actually calculate these things.
And how accurate are they?
Because a lot of these companies have not been super public about how, you know, what they're doing. In the meantime, they're just collecting data, right? So how accurate are they? My thing with the wearables, I get very anxious about wearables. A lot of people heard my story, you know, when I was doing the endurance training and stuff, like I was strapped to a device all the time for everything I did. And it got to a point where like my life revolved around what the data was telling me, and how it was life. Yep. And I had to get away from it all. So even like strapping something on, or even know I'm connected to something, gives me a little anxiety, and I think interferes with my ability to get whatever a true reading would really be. But I think that's interesting. So yeah, like you're in bed and you think hey, I went to bed at 10 o'clock last night and I'm getting up at 6, but what was happening for that first hour? You know, oh, you were checking your phone, or, you know, you're still trying to wind down, you're staring at the ceiling or whatever else. And how many times did you wake up? All that, it adds up. It's like, here's a good way of looking at it. Maybe it's like, you guys ever see this? This one freaks me out. And it happens every week. Every Sunday I get this little alert from my fucking iPhone about the screen time I've had. It's just mind blowing.
Going up?
I don't even want to say. It's mind blowing. Well, actually, the Vegas thing was interesting because I was so busy I wasn't on the phone.
Like you're down 40%.
Yeah, it's like whatever, and I was like, "What, really?" Because I feel like I'm on the phone all the time, but it tells you how many hours you haven't been on the phone, or have been on the phone. Mind blowing. So it's sort of a compare and contrast, like all of the little times, every time you open up that phone to check a text message, right? To send a text message, to scroll through, you know, social media, or to send an email, or
pay a bill, Instacart,
all
DoorDash.
of that stuff adds up. It's just like, so every time I roll over in my bed to, you know, do whatever, or I wake up, or I'm not in some of these deeper phases of sleep where I can actually benefit from the recovery piece or get into the benefits of sleep, adds up over time. And that's interesting, especially if people are already reporting they get less than 7 hours. So many people are reporting they get less than 7 hours anyways.
Yeah, they're basing that off of how long they're in bed. And how long they're actually sleeping is probably significantly less. But just to touch upon the wearable point, I think I could see how the data can become consuming.
Yeah, it
like
was
it
for
became
me.
consuming for you.
Yeah.
I think there is definitely something to be said about taking it with a grain of salt and also comparing the objective data with your subjective biofeedback
I
as
could
well.
not agree with you more.
Because that was the hardest thing for me with the Oura Ring. I'd wake up feeling like, pretty good. And it would tell me, you're a piece of shit. Like your level of recovery is at 40.
Don't
and I'm
do
like,
anything today.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. And it just kept over and over, dude. And I was like, I threw that thing away.
Yeah, I think there's some pitfalls, like you mentioned. And I remember having this conversation with you right out here on the floor, and how frustrated you were because at one point I think you had 2 devices working at the same time. And you were comparing and contrasting, and they were very much off. They were countering one another. But to your point, I 1,000% believe in the value of the values that a wearable device can provide. There's this spectrum of it, how much is too much. But and I've always said this too. I think some people need to be tracking a little bit more, and some people should probably be tracking a little bit less. Exactly. Where do you fit in there? But yeah, it gives you a little bit of a different perspective. Yes, you can take it with a grain of salt, but it gives you some insight to then maybe be making some more informed decisions.
Yeah, I think it can be enlightening, but it doesn't have to be a gospel. And I think, like I said, there's kind of a fine line there between what level of subjectivity we want in really anything that we're doing in fitness, in nutrition. There's value in the subjective feedback, but then we want to, we want to compare that to some objective black and white data as well, and probably end up somewhere in the middle. Because I've had that exact same experience. I've been using the Whoop, and there are times when I'm like, I feel fine. Like bullshit, my strain was that high. Like that was not that taxing of a workout, or like I'm not, I feel fine today. But there has been times that I noticed, like for example, I was feeling a little crummy earlier this week, and there was a stark contrast in my numbers. And that was telling for me, because typically I feel pretty good most of the time, and most of my numbers are very consistent. And then I had maybe a little bit of a bug going on, and the numbers just crashed.
Was it heart rate variability?
It was heart rate variability. It was respiratory rate. It was skin temperature. And it was a stark contrast. Like it was very different.
Yeah, I think people can relate to that too. Like they know when they're coming down with something. So like interestingly, I made it through the whole Vegas thing. And they call it the SHOT Show crud or flu or whatever. Everybody comes back sick. You go to Vegas, it's a filthy environment, right?
I came back
all the way around, and you're gonna come back sick because you're not sleeping, and it's very. There's a lot of just a lot of you're in a filthy environment. It's fucking Vegas. Everything's for sale, right? Everybody's drinking
everything.
Yeah,
if it's not nailed down, it's for sale.
Yeah, pretty much. I just think in general, you're likely going to go to a place like that and probably come back feeling terrible. I wasn't, aside from the sleep thing. So I was feeling really good. So this is a couple weeks back now, 2 weeks ago. So I was feeling really good, and people were like, "Hey, so did you get the credit?" I go, "No, man, I actually feel good." I had to catch up. I was down for basically the rest of the weekend. I was just chilling.
It's relaxing.
You just trying to relax, get some decent food, stay hydrated, that kind of thing, and sleep. And I still came in Monday, Tuesday feeling pretty fatigued, but I never got sick. The 10-year-old had this little upper respiratory thing going, and we hadn't seen her. She'd been gone, or we'd been gone, so she was staying with her dad. And she came back, and she had this little upper respiratory thing going on. Well, lo and behold, a few days later, I'm like, oh, I got this shit in my face now. Like I got this.
Oh my God.
Maybe it had to do with a suppressed immune system from not getting enough sleep, on top of being exposed, on top of other things. Being out of my general
you just
workout
came from
routine,
a high stress area,
all of those
and
things.
you're just chilling.
Yeah,
so I wound up with this little
vulnerable position.
Yeah, exactly. And I think most people can relate to this, but I wound up with this little upper respiratory thing. It's not major, but it's annoying, and it keeps me up. And I have a hard time breathing at night, right? So, for people that are overweight, right, and have a hard time breathing at night with sleep apnea, which is another major fucking issue. Is if you're already compromised, if you're overweight, maybe have some underlying metabolic condition or one that it's already been diagnosed and you're already being treated for, and you're not getting sleep. This just adds on to the top of those things, going back to what lack of sleep has been related to. My point of this being is most people can relate. You get that little head cold, and you wake up you're already annoyed because you got the head cold. And you're not sleeping well on top of that, and how that makes you feel the next day. You just feel dead. You almost feel hungover, and so people start reaching for things to feel better, like NyQuil or these sleep aids, which we can talk about in a minute, to clear up the symptoms, but to also, feel like they're getting a good night's sleep. And this just sends you down this whole other line of issues. So I wonder if we could talk a little bit about like the first off, let's back up and go like what happens during sleep, like in these sleep cycles or whatever. Let's keep that brief so we don't bore people with the science. And then what happens when they get interrupted, like in downstream? So maybe you can open up
on a kind of the 30,000 foot view on sleep cycles is you have your light sleep, your slow wave sleep, and your REM sleep. So you need to go through all of these cycles, and you go through the cycles several times every night, ideally. So your REM sleep that a lot of people are familiar with, the rapid eye movement, the dream sleep, the primary benefits there are for memory consolidation, emotional health. That's kind of when your brain is consolidating information from the day. REM sleep can be important for mood, for memory, things of that nature. And then your slow wave sleep or your delta wave sleep is when you are recovering the most. So that's when your heart rate is the slowest. That's when you are basically, more or less dead asleep. And then the light sleep is, what's going on kind of in between those.
It's kind of like a download. It's like a computer download. If you're uploading or downloading data, from a memory card like this podcast, it'll take hours to upload, video, right? And then, not quite as much time to upload the audio because it's not as dense as information. But if my Wi-Fi bandwidth here is being eaten up, by some other things that are happening, people are streaming or trying to download or whatever, it's basically a distraction, and it takes away from that. So it slows down the process, making me as a professional less efficient and effective because I can't get on with my fucking day.
Well, just imagine if you didn't go through REM sleep ever and you couldn't remember shit. You're not consolidating memories. How
you would be a nutcase.
You have no life, right? Yeah, you'd be a schizo.
Yeah, so you think about that, like in being maybe having one of these psychological, psycho-emotional type issues where you can't sleep.
Oh yeah.
Or you're on drugs or, medication, however you want to phrase that keep you from sleeping well. And there's a lot of them out there that aren't necessarily antipsychotics or whatever else that can really impact your sleep, and this can wreak havoc down the line. So, yeah, those are kind of the different sleep waves. You go through these periods. You were saying we go through them like, a few times a night, ideally. And it takes time to do this.
Yeah, each one has a time.
So the shorter amount of time you're in bed, right? Obviously, the less amount of time you have to go through these cycles, and therefore the frequency of those cycles would probably be limited as well. So there's something to be said for, being in bed and not getting into these cycles, but it's a whole other thing when you're just not getting in bed. I'm not tired. Or you're doing things, engaging in behaviors, consuming things, whether that be like visually or, or even like through food or whatever else that could interrupt this process. So
yeah, there can be a lot of factors at play there, and it can really vary person to person. I think that goes back to the quality versus quantity discussion, where you could be, in bed for 8 hours, whatever the case may be, and you're still not properly going through all of the cycles. You're still not getting enough slow wave sleep. You're still not getting enough REM sleep. Or, you could have good sleep hygiene and you're maybe only in bed for 5 to 6 hours, and you're actually getting more restorative sleep in that short period of time than someone who is sleeping longer.
So this is possible.
Yeah.
This is possible for some people, because everybody knows somebody in their life that seems like they don't sleep.
Dude, my dad, 5 hours. That's it.
Yeah, no, I had a really good friend for a long time who, like, this dude, maybe 4 or 5 hours a night. Like, and that's just what he did. This dude was a high achiever, high performer, jacked, like very good physical condition, really well put together. And that was him.
Yeah. Those types of people, though, are going to be more the exception than
anomalies.
The rule. Yeah, they're going to be more anomalies.
And that's also something to talk about, because we talk about 8 to 10 hours of sleep. Well, it's variable for some people. For me, 8 hours sucks, and 7 is fucking rock star for me.
So that is a thing. I think what's important here is what the point you were bringing is those are maybe outliers, and this is not something that you should strive to achieve. Like, I want to be really good at sleeping only 4 or 5 hours. Like, it's not something you can achieve that way.
It's how you're built.
Yeah, there's not really a way to train for that. And I think that, like, I don't know, hustle culture or whatever you want to call it, where,
millionaire mindset.
I'll sleep when I'm dead. Well, you'll get there faster if you don't sleep. So
you're en route, buddy.
You're on the way. I think most people, a lot of people that I talk to, they're like, 5-6 hours. And these people are not necessarily high achieving, killing it. But they don't seem to really realize that their inadequate sleep could be playing a role in all of these other factors. It's not even really front of mind. We talk about all kinds of, I'm having trouble losing weight. I'm stressed out. My energy levels are low. My mood is bad. What should I be eating? What should I be changing? What should I be doing in my workouts? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, well, how are you sleeping? Mm-hmm. Can we talk about that?
That can be really frustrating for somebody because, they're looking for an answer like now. And what you're telling them is like, actually, it's a behavior thing that we need to fix first or need to attempt to work on first. Fixing is an operative word there. But this is such an important pillar in all things: performance, aesthetics, longevity, health, just being balanced, right? So it has to be the pillar. And I think what I'm hearing you say without saying is like, this is probably likely the biggest pillar in the thing. Because if that thing's off, it doesn't matter if you're eating the right amount of calories and your workouts are dialed in and you're taking all the supplements and even PEDs for that matter. If you want to go down that path, sleep.
Your trend's not going to work as well.
Right. Sleep is king every single time. So you just mentioned like meeting with people and they're not necessarily high achievers. They're not killing it in life and in whatever that means for them. What are some of the downstream effects? We mentioned a couple of them. What are some of the downstream effects of not getting enough sleep and good quality sleep?
Well, I think the one that's on the forefront of a lot of people's mind is, at least the people that I talk to, my clients, is weight loss. Obviously, weight loss
always boils down to that.
Always boils down to weight loss. I mean, either weight loss or building muscle.
It always is.
It's one. They're kind of one and the same in terms of sleeping. But as far as weight loss goes, if you are not sleeping well, if you're not getting enough restorative sleep, then cortisol comes into play. You have this chronically elevated cortisol. When your cortisol or stress hormone is chronically elevated, your body is going to basically go into an emergency mode, where emergency mode is not conducive for weight loss. Emergency mode is conducive for holding on to fat.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is like the fight or flight, right?
Yep,
and
exactly.
the being chased by a tiger, versus just being stressed out by your boss. Your body doesn't know. Cortisol kicks up.
Yeah,
right?
same.
We've talked about cortisol as the hormone here. It's the one that we're chasing while we're working out. It's a good thing. It helps partition or tells basically, the partitioning of different macronutrients at different times of the day. It is a good thing.
Yes.
It's just chronically hitting that button over and over and over and over again without getting the recovery that we need is when it becomes a problem. And I love that you brought that up because when we're looking at sort of cortisol cycles, the cortisol should be dropping at the end of the day, right? There's going to be a spike at the beginning of the day. Well, at least that's what it should be. As your body's getting up and getting ready to go for the day, it starts to turn on this, okay, we're going to hit the afterburner button, that is cortisol, a little bit to get things going. It starts hormonal process to just get your body moving, rocking and rolling for the day. As the day goes on, maybe you go through a workout at some point midday or later in the day, you might get a little spike, but ultimately it should go back down as you're heading into bedtime. What are some of the things that are impacting this in a negative way that is keeping cortisol up? We talked about just stress in general. That could be environmental stress, emotional stress, things you may be putting in your system from like anything you may be consuming in your diet. Maybe we talk about some of the effects of some of those things and how to mitigate that. One that comes to mind for me right away is alcohol, and how that can wreak havoc on getting into sleep. Like and to start this off, and then I want to hear kind of what you have to say about this, Stephen, is alcohol is a sedative, right? So it's going to relax you and help you maybe basically fall asleep. And now we get into the quality piece. Can you talk a little bit about how it impacts the quality of sleep?
Yeah. I think that's a very common myth, especially if someone is trying to no longer drink. Like, oh, I can't sleep now, or my glass of wine, at the end of the day or after dinner, it helps me fall asleep, or it helps me sleep. It might help you fall asleep because, yeah, you're sedated. You're not actually asleep. You're just
Yep.
temporarily sedated. What alcohol does, not to get too much into the weeds of neurotransmitters and things like that, alcohol increases GABA. So GABA is a relaxing neurotransmitter. So GABA goes up. When GABA goes up, we feel relaxed. It's easier for us to go to sleep. But when as the alcohol begins to be metabolized and leave our body, now our brain is trying to rebalance. So in comes glutamate, and glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter. So typically, your brain is always trying to find balance. But alcohol has shot GABA way up. Now the brain is trying to increase glutamate and bring the GABA down. And what happens is that balance gets thrown off. Now glutamate skyrockets, and that's when you wake up in the middle of the night with anxiety, or anyone who's experienced hangxiety.
Night sweats.
Yeah, the day after, the morning after a night where you were, getting after it. Basically, that glutamate level has gone up, and now you feel anxious. Alcohol might be very temporarily help you fall asleep for a few hours, but then your sleep is going to be disrupted. Alcohol also disrupts REM sleep as well. That disrupted REM sleep probably has something to do with maybe not remembering the night before quite as well, or your mood being all over the place.
Yeah, so this is like, and I brought up the cortisol first to talk about the alcohol, because a lot of people are going to the alcohol to negate the stress and the effects of the cortisol, or the cortisol is a byproduct of the stress, but they're looking to balance that out. And so what you just did was paint a really clear picture of how your body kind of overcompensates, right? It's similar to like the insulin glucagon response. Like, I put in all this sugar into my system, or food for that matter. I have an insulin response. Insulin spikes. It's very high. Your body senses this. It's trying to bring this back down, starts to release glucagon in order to do that. But then glucagon now is overpowering the insulin, and now you're feeling this tired and, whatever feeling that you're feeling, and you're trying to find this balance throughout the day. That's the low time, the low spot after lunch. That's 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, where you're just like fighting to stay awake.
Hypoglycemic.
So, yeah, very similar type of processes. You're not really getting into that sleep. Alcohol is detrimental. There's also a lot of study that's going on now just with regard to how, if you're regularly consuming alcohol, your body will actually the brain actually rewires itself. And chemically, things actually completely change, not from a dependency perspective, but how it reacts to the alcohol, and ultimately how it reacts to the sleep at the end of the day. So you are effectively taking away your ability to get there by regularly doing this. And that's something to think about. And the reason I brought alcohol up first was because it always comes up. It almost always comes up. I mean, there's very few people who are like, I don't drink, that I run into in the nutrition game that are having challenges with their nutrition. Majority of the people that I work with are having, one or more drinks during the week. And the thing with alcohol is the half-life on it, like caffeine, can be very long for people once it's put into your system. I mean, it can be, a few hours to 24-hour period. So, I might be having that drink in the afternoon at lunch, but it's still impacting me, at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock when I'm getting ready to go to bed at night. I just don't realize it. I'm not immediately feeling these effects, but it's still there, and my body's still dealing with it chemically from a metabolic perspective. And that might be very different for somebody that can have a drink at 5, have a drink at 6, and their body metabolizes it very, very quickly, gets through, breaks it down in a much different way, and it isn't as impacted. So this is very individual on how that alcohol can impact your sleep. But the bottom line is we know it does. There's no doubt about that. And so if you're regularly going to bed and you're doing that with a glass of wine or 2, kind of every night or multiple nights per week, understand that will, let's go back to the downstream piece, impacting. There's a lot of correlation to not being able to lose fat, right? And not being able to recover correctly through science or through the science of what alcohol is doing to you and during that sleepy period. What are some of the other like downstream effects that we know about? So I brought up insulin. Maybe we talk about that one. Maybe we talk about that one next. But what are some of the downstream effects of not getting quality sleep?
Well, do you want to talk about insulin?
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, bottom line is insulin sensitivity is extremely important in your body's ability to process glucose or to process sugar. So a lack of sleep can interfere with insulin sensitivity. When your insulin sensitivity is poor or you are developing insulin resistance, now the glucose that is released into your bloodstream after you eat that should be getting shuttled into your cells to be put to use is just hanging out in your bloodstream. So insulin is not able to do its job, basically, if you're not sleeping very well. And insulin resistance is a huge problem for a lot of people, not just people who are diabetic or people who are pre-diabetic, but the fact is that a huge portion of our population is diabetic.
Oh, it's massive right now, and this is just like what the scientists, the CDC, the whoever says they know, right? So it's huge. They're saying it's like 75% of, I think it's more than that. It's like 67% we already know are diabetic or pre-diabetic, and there's like another 30% that don't even know yet. So they start layering that. What's that?
Undiagnosed. Yeah.
Undiagnosed, right? So they don't know. So I mean, consider 75% of our population is either diabetic or pre-diabetic. Like they have problems with insulin sensitivity. That is a fucking problem, man. And that has a whole.
It's manageable.
But it has a whole litany of, again, using that term, creates a whole litany of issues going downstream when we go to, well, if that blood sugar is just hanging out in the bloodstream, what happens cardiovascularly, or vascularly in the system? We've talked about that on the show. We talk about
what
plaques.
Happens to the liver as well. Yeah.
What happens to the liver? What happens to the brain? What happens to the gut? And what's happening with your immune system as it's mounting, a response to things that are in your blood that shouldn't be in your blood. There's a lot of things that go on here with regard to not sleeping well. And what's interesting with that insulin response thing, and this has been measured, is that even in the healthiest person, if they drink the night before or maybe they're not even drinking, but they don't get good sleep, like they don't get solid quality sleep, they can see lower sensitivity to insulin literally the next day. So this has that kind of an impact. It's not like, you're doing this over a long period of time and this happens. No, it happens immediately. So your insulin sensitivity goes down after a poor night's sleep. So, all that work you're doing, to try to mitigate sleep, this is not like obviously accumulating this type of thing over time is a problem, but it has an immediate impact like right now.
Can have an acute, it can have an acute effect. I guess in other, we touched on testosterone as well. I think that's another issue, or that's another area that doesn't get talked about enough. Low T is an issue that a lot of men are very, very concerned about, and they're looking everywhere other than how they're sleeping. Not sleeping adequately can have a major effect on testosterone production. And I don't think that gets talked about enough.
Yeah. Again, the downstream effects are wide-reaching. Our bodies have to do that. Some of the other things that are impacting us not getting sleep, and this is becoming, I think it's going to become more well documented. It's being talked about a lot, but I don't know about the research in terms of how much is out there and how much can they really study, because a lot of this I think is subjective. But the amount of time we spend in front of our screens, and what that does to serotonin levels, particularly later at night, and what that does to our cortisol response, for that matter, and keeping us up, and also the stimulating effect of blue light that's coming off like tablets and TVs and phones and all that stuff that keeps us excited, right? And which would make it harder for us to fall asleep. And then if people are internalizing this shit, it's one thing to watch your favorite episode of Breaking Bad or whatever, and getting the blue light exposure. It's a whole other thing if you're floating through Instagram and you get triggered by every other post that you see see on there, and now you're having an emotional response to this as well, which impacts things. And there's not a person listening to this that doesn't know exactly what I'm fucking talking about. And there's not a person in this room or listening to this that hasn't laid there at the end of the day, right? Thinking you're whining, again, going back to how many hours are you spending in bed versus how many hours you're actually asleep, scrolling through Instagram. Or when you do wake up to take a leak or whatever you have to do, pick up your phone.
Worst thing you could do.
Worst thing you could fucking do. Yeah, man.
Especially in the middle of the night.
And just disrupt that whole thing. Even if you did a really good job of not doing it and prepping for bedtime, which we can talk about, as far as some behavior or some things that you can do to improve your sleep. Even if you did a really good job, if you pick that phone up in the middle of the night or basically are exposed to any kind of light, during this process, it's going to throw the process off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's a good segue into a few different sleep hygiene tips, manipulating light and dark cycles. But yeah, as far as blue light and melatonin secretion, we talked about cortisol being high at the beginning of the day, getting us up, getting us going throughout the day, and then decreasing as we get into the evening and closer to bed. And that's when melatonin secretion should
increase.
Increase. One of the body's main cues to begin cortisol release is light, is the first light of the day, and sunlight is blue light. And blue light also comes from our devices. So when you are on a laptop, when you are watching TV, when you're on your phone, close to bed, your eyes are picking up that blue light, and there's a direct communication to your brain that's telling your brain it's still daytime.
Right. So it's a melatonin disruptor.
Yeah,
is what it is.
Yeah. It's cueing your brain that it's daytime. It's not time to go to bed. So one of the best sleep hygiene tips that you can utilize is taking advantage of light and dark cycles to set your circadian rhythms. One of the best ways to do that is to view morning sunlight. Typically, I would recommend the first light of the day, or aligning your sleep schedule. That's another, that you should have a schedule, number one, where you're going to bed and you're waking up around the same time or at the same time every day, and aligning that schedule as closely as possible with the natural light and dark cycles. Obviously, you're not going to go to bed in the winter at 6 o'clock,
right?
But if you can wake up as close to dawn as possible, or around that time, and view light immediately, that's setting your circadian rhythm in a good way.
Almost more important than going to bed after it gets dark, or when it's going dark, is the getting up to get the process started in the morning, which I don't think a lot of people think about.
Yeah, a good night's sleep starts in the morning.
Yeah, that's really good. I think that's something people should walk away with. A huge takeaway from this is like, how am I getting my day started? That's the circadian rhythm piece is so important with the total balance of things. But just going back to the melatonin, right? And blue light being a melatonin disruptor. A lot of times when people are having trouble sleeping, they're reaching for supplements. They're reaching for things like melatonin, and so we need to talk about that in this podcast. Is what is happening when I take melatonin, and in both in the short and the long term. So melatonin being that hormone that gets switched on, it's telling you it's nighttime, it's time to go to sleep. And again, we talked about serotonin releases and things like that, and that chemical balance that happens to make you feel relaxed, and ultimately get there and then work into your sleep cycles. But pros and cons of melatonin.
Well, yeah, in my experience in the supplement industry, anytime someone is not sleeping, that's the very first thing that they're looking for. Okay, I can't sleep, I need melatonin. I would always dissuade people from taking melatonin, or at least try to educate them on when is the right time to use melatonin and how much melatonin should you be actually taking. So melatonin is a hormone that your body produces naturally. And anytime we're supplementing with a hormone, we run the risk of disrupting the natural production or interfering with the natural production of that hormone. So what I would observe with people who were using melatonin is they were using it way too frequently, and they were using it in excessive doses. Melatonin really shouldn't be taken every single night. because that is definitely going to disrupt your natural production of melatonin. And over time, it's probably going to form a dependence. And as you form dependence and you build a tolerance, now we're taking more and more and more and more. And it can actually have the opposite effect at some point in time where now I can't sleep at all. And I'm taking 20 milligrams of melatonin or just taking way too much. And I saw people fall into that trap often.
It's like cocaine and heroin, right? You know, like you're already disrupting with the blue light or your behaviors late in the day. And now you're trying to offset it by taking the thing that your body can't produce because of your behaviors. It's a wicked, that's a wicked cycle.
Yeah, trying to jam some melatonin in there when you're, like you said, your behaviors are disrupting the natural production of it.
Yeah, so we've got this, all right, so maybe one of the things also is start your day with some sunlight, like, and try to get that to happen as close to dawn as you can. And then the second part of that is like, okay, well, at night, let's start to limit, if we can, limit our exposure to blue light the best we can. But it's not just blue light that does this. It's all lights that can do this. And so we live in a modern age, right? I mean, we're surrounded by lights and electricity. I was just talking about my Vegas story. It's basically, there's fucking lights everywhere and they're stimulating, they're flashing, and that's there for a reason, right? That's by design. But in your house or in your apartment or whatever else, I mean, starting to, tone things down, from a lighting perspective, get, lower lumen lights to, illuminate your house, but, you're not getting blasted with the LEDs and again, the blue light that's coming off your TV and whatever else. Hopefully this is starting to make a little sense to you. I mean, I know people that actually go to candlelight every night.
Incandescent bulbs as well at a hip height, right? To simulate campfire.
Right.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, there's some all kinds of stuff that I've heard people doing and they swear by it. And so unless you're off the fucking grid, right, and you can completely shut down and whatever, what might be realistic for you is, one, you need to have a schedule. You mentioned that. When am I going to sleep? Just like your workouts, you should be scheduling workouts, just like you schedule your work day and all your appointments and whatever else. So you have your schedule, but it's also like, what am I doing to prepare for this? Can I start shutting down the lighting sources? There's other things I think you want to talk about that too, which is like, how do you set up your bedroom, to do things, but start to eliminate these other lighting sources that, could be impacting your sleep. Because again, it could be any lights. Doesn't necessarily have to be the blue light. That one we just know is a serious melatonin disruptor.
Yeah, and that can include all of the tiny little lights on electronics. There's research that's shown that even those tiny little flashing lights on whatever, a modem or something like that, can have an effect on your melatonin secretion. So
they piss me off.
Yeah,
I could tell you, so like the sonic toothbrushes. So we have those in our bathroom, and the way the room is that bathroom sink. There's
they let you know when they're done charging, don't they?
Fuck, dude. It's like Cece's is on one side, so mine's kind of blocked by this little pony wall, but like hers is across the room, and it's bright ass green, and it's on my side of the bed, and so I'll wake up and it's like somebody's shining a laser in my face. It really is that annoying to me. So I have to, sometimes I'll get up and I'll put something in front of it, but now I've been disrupted. Right. But it's also like, it's right now, it's creating an emotional response. And I'm like, God damn, this little light. And that's all it is. It's just that little tiny green.
Get electrical tape over it.
LED.
That's what I do. It might sound overzealous, but yeah, I've put tape over all of the little light sources. Even if the TV is off, the little light, the indicator that it's plugged in, whatever the case may be, I've put tape over all that. I want it to be as absolutely as dark as possible. If you can have blackout curtains, go for it. Whatever you can do to make your sleep space as dark as possible is a good practice.
So that's the stuff on the light stuff. But what else? I mean, what are some of the things that, through science or studying, we know can be beneficial to help get into those deeper levels of sleep?
Well, the one that I would touch on next, I call it the sleep sanctuary. Where your bedroom needs to be for sleeping and sex only. Don't have your office / bedroom / kitchen / you're eating in bed, you're working in bed, you're doing all these things other than sleeping in your bed and in your bedroom. There's a psychological aspect or a psychological factor where when I enter my place of sleeping, even if you don't have a bedroom, if you have some other place where you sleep, your cave, sleep should be what's on my mind, not work, not eating, not anything other than this is my place of rest. This is my sanctuary where the rest of the world or whatever else is going on does not matter, because this is the sleeping quarters, and that is all that it's for. When you work in bed or eat in bed, now you associate all of these other thoughts with that bed. And you're now thinking about those things when you're in that bed. When I get to my bed, it's like, this is sleep time. Boom. Like my mind is immediately cued. I don't give a fuck about anything else that's going on. I have now entered my sleep sanctuary. My day is done. Sleeping is now all I'm concerned about.
Smart. It's like the dog in the crate. I put it in there. Right. Calms right down. Close that door. Close that door. She hears the little thing locked. She doesn't like it at first. Then she's like, oh, this is.
We're not that different after all.
Yeah, we're not. We're not. Yeah, it's like dog crates. For the dog that doesn't have an anxiety issue or separation anxiety, but yeah, I mean, I've been there, and I'm guilty, like a lot of us probably are. I'm guilty of, there's a TV, that being on, trying to fall asleep to the TV. Again, I already mentioned the phone and the little light. I mean, these are all little things that add up, and we talked about, this small percentage that makes such a big difference. Getting 6.5 hours versus getting 7 full hours can have an impact on a lot of things. I mean, what else? I mean, is there anything else in there, like within that sanctuary that, we know through science is helpful to take us into these sleep cycles?
Temperature, sleeping cold. I think a lot of people, they associate warmth with sleeping. High temperatures actually can disrupt your sleep. There is supposed to be a natural drop in body temperature that takes place when we sleep. So you want to keep your place of sleeping, your sleep sanctuary, 65 degrees or below. And I know there are a lot of women out there who are like, you are insane.
Okay, we have to talk about this, dude.
Because it's a fucking issue. I was about to go off on this. Like, I'm like biting my tongue.
Yeah, it's an issue. Like, and I mean, this came up the other day, and I was giving Cece such a fucking hard time because she's like got 4 layers of clothes on, right? We got the sheet. There's the comforter, which is really a quilt, because I want to sleep cold, right? And then she's got like 2 more blankets on top of that. Like one's like a throw blanket, and the other one's one of those big, heavy, fuzzy, weighted blankets. So there's all this shit on the bed, and the dog sleeps on the bed, by the way.
Which is body heat.
Which is heat as well. And so she's just fucking covered. And you know what ends up happening? Like by halfway through the night, she's like naked. Like she stripped all this shit off, and guess where those things all go? They wind up on me. Yeah. So I'm like battling through the night to get these things out there. So like, I think I know where you're going with that, Jeff. Like, I know there's dudes out there that are thinking that or feeling this right now.
Yeah, we've all been there. Yeah.
It's crazy. Like, it drives me nuts, and it has been very disruptive. It's not a big deal in the summer, right? But even in the winter, I run the ceiling fan. Like the ceiling fan is going to be on 24/7 in my bedroom, right? And there's air conditioning gets run at night. Like, fuck this saving money and, Gavin Newsom's plan to, do whatever and shut down. My fucking shit is on. Like that air conditioning.
I take 30-minute showers, dude.
It's 68 degrees in that room. It's got to be like in like in the summer, like a lot of times I'll sleep on top of the covers. Like I just sleep on top, shorts and a t-shirt or whatever else. So yeah, I think that temperature thing is probably one of the biggest things. Like I recognize right away, like if I go back to the hotel and stay in the hotel, first thing I do when I walk in that door is go to that air conditioning. I turn it down, that fucker down as low as I can get it, because I need the air circulation. Number one, like I have to have that cool air. Like even in the wintertime, sometimes I'll open it. I'll open that window, but I keep that fan on. I can keep that fan on too. That's really important for me. Like I've noticed that's a big deal for me. But what you're saying is like, there's science behind this.
Yeah. Biologically, you're going to get into those sleep cycles more effectively when you're. It's similar to the blue light or light and cortisol versus dark and melatonin. When your body temperature is still high, your body thinks it's still daytime. So that drop in temperature that naturally occurs when it's nighttime and it's colder, that is another cue that it's time to rest. So if you're artificially keeping the temperature high, your body is now confused as to, is it time to sleep? I don't know. It's the same temperature as it was during the day.
So science says men are right. Is what I just heard right now, I think.
You said that, Jeff.
I did. Women, you're wrong. We sleep cold. Science.
Science.
Ask the science. And so for any inquiries after the show, go ahead and contact Jeff. This is his email address.
Working on his licensed marriage and family therapist.
Very good at it, actually.
Yeah.
So those are big ones. We talked a little bit about caffeine, the half-life of caffeine. Again, it can depend person to person, but roughly about 6 hours is the half-life of caffeine, meaning that it could take up to 12 hours for caffeine to get completely out of your system. Caffeine has an effect on cortisol, so that's going to affect the cortisol and melatonin balance. Food, we haven't touched on eating close to bed.
Yeah, there's a couple things. I mean, one, when you're talking about the caffeine piece, I mean, for those stim heads out there that we've talked about that have just pre-workout at that 5 o'clock in the evening or, post-work.
Yeah, good luck sleeping. Yeah.
Workout, think about this. We said that on the show before with you're doing that and then you're having to go to melatonin at night and, the challenge, that vicious cycle that happens there. But yeah, I mean, with the huge amounts of caffeine plus the adaptogens that they're putting in there to enhance the caffeine, right? On top of whatever else you're doing throughout the day with your coffees and your, bangs or, rock stars or whatever else. Yeah, this is a thing. And you should probably be looking a little harder at that. But yeah, coming into, that next thing with regard to, the cortisol cycle and getting things fired up and trying to turn them off, food being one of those things. So it's a lot of talk, man. There's been a lot of talk for a long time about hey, don't eat too close to bedtime because going to bed on a full stomach, can disrupt the sleep cycle because your body is focused on the thermogenesis. Yeah, to get that done. But on the flip side of that, there could be some benefit for some people. So let's talk about the eating too late, and quote unquote. I'm going to put too late in air quotes here. What happens there?
Yeah, what you typically hear is to not eat within 2 hours of bed. Because digestion is expensive energy-wise. So if your body is focused on digestion and a lot of energy is going towards digestion, there's not going to be, you have a finite amount of energy, so not as much energy is going to be going towards all these other biological systems. You may be able to fall asleep. It might not be an issue of it keeping you awake or indigestion or something like that. But you may not be getting as restorative a sleep as you could be getting because your body is focused on digestion versus all these other processes that have to be put on hold.
Yeah, so I can hear the people out there already going, dude, I have to get in 250 grams of protein a day. I'm up at 6 a.m. and I'm trying to go to bed at 10, right? How the hell am I going to get it all in if I can't eat past 2 hours or I can't eat past 8 o'clock or whatever? Or I don't want to fast that long. I want to make sure that I need this energy or I need these calories in my system. And so this would be for more of the quote unquote athlete. I would also just consider anybody that's working out regularly that quote unquote athlete and that they have to get these calories in, right? So that might be easier said than done. And in a lot of cases, what we know is there's benefit to making sure that you do put that food in your system before you sleep. And there's some science around what to do versus what not to do. There's some studies, maybe some science around that. And I'm not well read on a lot of it, but people are here what type of protein should I be putting in late at night versus what or not. I'm not that's splitting hairs, but it's more about what's happening hormonally and what's happening chemically with regard to the sleep process and, hormone regulation. And so, we going back to the hormone cortisol and that thing being elevated at night when we don't want it to be for whatever the reasons are. Carbohydrate actually helps to switch off cortisol. So it might be helpful. I know, Jeff, you've said that on the show a couple of times just to remind people, it might be helpful to eat some carbohydrate, a little bit, immediately before bed to help bring down within an hour before bedtime in order to start to maybe bring down or shut down that cortisol response.
If we have the cortisol curve is messed up, there's eating protocols for carbohydrates in specific, if you're high at night or low in the morning, like not eating carbs, maybe, getting some caffeine or whatever, right? Trying to spike that cortisol to get your curve back on point. But it's not just about eating carbs. You also have to do the sleeping and all the other stuff to get this thing, the stress and work on the stress, right?
Right.
Lifestyle and all of that. But yeah, it can definitely help you get to sleep and have some good quality sleep.
Yeah, I think that another interesting thing to note here is that if you're on a very low carbohydrate diet, that generally will contribute to a little higher cortisol response. So if you're eating keto, understand that your cortisol response could be off as a result. Now, there's a lot of things, benefits to eating that way for certain people.
For sure.
But just
if you're doing CrossFit though, probably not the best for you. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, if you're, there's a lot of studies behind keto and how it can help people with some certain medical conditions. And obviously, people that are very insulin and, insensitive, it could be a really great place for them to start to kind of work that insulin sensitivity back up. But if you're a person who's trying to sort of always eating that way, just understand, or you're on you're going through a period of time where you're just eating keto for whatever it is, months, weeks, whatever you're doing here, just understand that could be an issue for you, that being that cortisol being high or not coming down, and it could be a disruptor of your sleep.
If you have to cycle your carbs back during keto, there's an issue there, in my opinion.
How do you mean?
So if you're on ketosis, right, you're going to hit a finite point where your body is going to switch back.
Yep.
So they cycle back in carbohydrates, right, to basically... Okay. If you have to do that on a diet, it's probably not the most sustainable. You know what I'm saying? Like, and like we're talking about, there is pros and cons and times to use this, and cancer feeds on carbohydrates. Sometimes it also feeds on fat. On other times, you have to know what period you're in, right? You're not just keto because I have cancer, right? But there are times and things to use these diets for.
Yeah, without getting too far off track, there, just understand that there is a hormonal response to. Again, this was going back to originally where I started with this type of diet thing, that people are on, like what's important, what do they need to know about the diet that they've chosen or the eating style that they've chosen. And this could be an issue for you. This has been sort of well documented. So just understand that going in.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've covered sleeping dark. We've covered sleeping cold. We've covered sleep schedule. We've covered sleep sanctuary. We just touched on food and caffeine cutoff. The only other tip that I have, we could talk a little bit more about the supplemental piece. I think there's maybe a few other things to talk about regarding melatonin supplementation. But introducing some type of brown noise can be helpful for people. So like a fan or an air purifier. Personally, I play binaural beats, basically like delta wave sounds, or I don't know if music is the right word for it, but basically kind of like calming sounds that can be helpful in terms of helping calm your mind, calm racing thoughts. Some people have issue, like for example, maybe if you're used to sleeping with the TV on, which is a terrible sleep hygiene habit, but for whatever reason that you're used to sleeping with the TV on, now total silence is very loud. So that could be a way to substitute something that's not disrupting you from the light, and not stimulating your mind. Because if you're if it's a TV show or something playing, like your mind is getting that whatever input is coming in from the TV show. So that's something that I've found helpful, running an air purifier, running these binaural beats that are just quietly, or if you will like ocean sounds or something like that. It's all same idea.
Yeah, if you're like me, like I live in a townhome that's in a very metropolitan, urban, part of the city, and there's always stuff going on. Whether it's sirens, whether it's cars driving by, dogs barking, people walking. I live like on a park, so there's activity out there early in the morning, late at night, whatever else. And like in the summertime or whatever, that activity goes later, because there's more light and it's warmer and whatever else. And so I have to put on background noise to drown out the outside noise, even with the windows closed. And it's interesting, like in the wintertime, like this has been cold. We haven't had much of that. And the way our sleep cycles work, I'm usually up before a lot of activity is going on outside, and I'm asleep after. So a lot of activity, but that's for now until it starts to warm up. But like for people that live in apartments, like this is a really good idea so that you're not hearing your neighbors, you're not hearing, and also like if you're sleeping in a hotel, which I never do well for the first couple of nights I'm there anyways. But you hear the traffic in the hallway, the passing by, the garbage truck, unbeknownst to you, because the dumpster for the hotel is right below your window or whatever else. I mean, all these things add up. And so to have some of this type of background, just call it background music, can be helpful. The other time I use it where I recognize it really helped me is like when I go traveling in the travel van, because depending on where we are, like where we're parked or whatever, like I take the little pill, a little Bose speaker or whatever, and I'll run that exact type of music in the background it's like a little cocoon in there, and drown out the sounds that are going on in the outside. So super important. I love that tip, and I think probably more people should be, you do it for your little babies, right? Why? Mm-hmm. To keep them from fucking waking up and disturbing your sleep. Yep. So why wouldn't you do it for your sleep?
Yeah, so that's something that's been helpful for me as well. And then I guess just to circle back on the supplementation and melatonin, we talked about people taking too much melatonin and taking it too frequently. To tie a bow on that, you can use melatonin in a targeted fashion and have it be beneficial, using it on a periodic as needed basis. Like you said, when you were coming back from the SHOT Show, and you were in a sleep deficit, you can use melatonin to reset. That's a good way to use melatonin, is as a reset if you're in the hole in terms of you've been sleep deprived for several days, and you need to just knock yourself out and have maybe sleep a little bit longer than you typically would. Maybe you need 9 hours because you're in the hole. You can use melatonin for that. Traveling between time zones is also a good time to use melatonin, because your circadian rhythm is going to be all thrown off. Jet lag, especially if you're traveling internationally, and there's a 10-hour time difference and you're completely upside down in terms of light and dark.
It's the worst.
Melatonin can help reset your circadian rhythm to wherever you are now, to get on the schedule of where you've now traveled. So that's a good time to use it as well. And in terms of dosing, I never recommend more than 3 milligrams. About 3 milligrams is the upper end of the dosage. Between 0.5 milligram and 3 milligrams, maybe 2 milligrams is a nice place to be, but no more than 3. I've seen a lot of folks going with 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, and then they're taking 10 milligrams twice. That's too much. I know there might be someone coming out of the peanut gallery in terms of during COVID, there were some people saying that these high doses of melatonin, 80 milligrams, had benefits for other health benefits besides sleep. I haven't seen enough evidence to really comment much on that, but like anti-cancer benefits, immune benefits, again, I haven't been able to look deeply enough into that, but thought I'd address it because somebody will.
Dude, I never heard it, but
I haven't heard of that one either.
I thought it was
must have come from Pfizer.
I thought it was ludicrous when I first heard it. I'm like, how could you possibly take 80 milligrams of melatonin and not be like hungover and like delirious and in some sort of
sounds horrible,
or be like Shaggy from Scooby Doo.
Yeah, sounds horrible.
Yeah, so but I know it's going to come up because there's maybe some quote unquote functional medicine practitioners or holistic practitioners, whatever you want to say, who've made that point. Aside from melatonin, though, in terms of sleep supplements, one of our recent posts on the Instagram feed, just this past week, I talked about my top 5 sleep supplements that are not melatonin.
Yeah.
L-theanine is a good one. L-theanine helps calm racing thoughts. It's basically anti-anxiety supplement, and it's a naturally occurring amino acid. It's naturally occurring in green tea. Green tea might not be the best thing to take before bed because of potential caffeine content, but maybe a decaf green tea, although, again, could have some diuretic effects that cause you to get up in the middle of the night to go pee. So L-theanine's a good one. 5-HTP. We talked on the serotonin piece. 5-HTP helps promote relaxation and feelings of well-being. So again, if you are someone who has trouble turning your mind off or you're stressed out, and that's what keeps you awake, and that's what prevents you from falling asleep, 5-HTP can help with that. Just help you kind of take the edge off, chill out without turning to alcohol. Magnesium, I think that's been brought up quite a few times, but the question is always what type of magnesium. Magnesium oxide sucks. Never use magnesium oxide for anything unless you need a laxative. Magnesium glycinate would be the best choice for sleep because it's bound to the amino acid glycine, and glycine helps promote relaxation. But one that people may not be as familiar with is magnesium L-threonate, also known as Magtine, is the trademark name. And Magtine is something that I've used before bed as well. It's a form of magnesium that actually crosses the blood-brain barrier, where other forms of magnesium do not. And that can be, what I've noticed when taking that one in particular is my memory formation of the previous day seems to be better.
Interesting.
I seem to wake up with more clarity and I recall the previous day better.
Fascinating.
So that one is a little expensive in comparison to other forms of magnesium, but that's because it's a higher quality form of magnesium. Reishi mushroom has been shown to improve REM sleep. So there can be a bit of a line there. I know sometimes reishi gives me wild dreams a little bit, but there is some benefit to increasing your REM sleep for reasons that we already discussed: emotional health, memory consolidation, all that jazz. And then on the herbal side, valerian root.
Right. Oh, that one's been around for quite some time.
Valerian root, lemon balm, chamomile. Those are all, you'll find them in herbal teas and things like that. Those can be beneficial as well. So if you want to steer clear of the melatonin, there you go.
Yeah, try them one at a time too. Don't go throwing all. Where do I get that concoction?
Such concoctions do exist. But maybe focus one at a time and see which works best for you.
Yeah, and I would always say you work on the sleep hygiene piece first, not the sleep supplementation piece. And you covered that in a lot of detail. We talked a lot about those things. So probably again, just bringing it back, it's like one of the most important things. In the entire formula for success from a health or performance or fat loss or muscle gain perspective is your recovery, and it starts and stops with, the quality, how much and what the quality is of your sleep. So if you guys want more information on that, we do have kind of a little summary on this, on some of the things that Steven has talked about. You can go to rdfguides.com, and when you go there, you'll see our 6 steps to optimal health. And you can download that thing for free. And we do have a little section in there on sleep as well as supplementation. We do talk a little bit about melatonin. But also, you could also reach out to Steven here at Red Dot Fitness by going to rdftrainonline.com. Just hit us on the contact page and let us know you want to talk with Steven, and we'll get you set up with a consult.
Absolutely. Call me the Sandman. Sandman.